All right, welcome to day one of the Front Desk Freedom Project. I'm super excited over this entire week. We're going to be doing trainings from how to hire the right person, how to actually get them on board to be able to handle objections, how do I teach them, and then ultimately how do I lead them so that they want to stick around and they don't want to leave after a few weeks. So today we're going to dive into how do I find a player front desk who actually stick around. And really, I want you to be able to have a confident and consistent front desk team so that you're not dealing with turnover and you don't have to micromanage them. And how do they actually turn these people into cash paying patients, even when you're not micromanaging everything? So, here's my promise to you today. What you're going to hear and what you're going to leave this training with is you're going to see why some of your past hires have maybe failed. Why the front desk has become a basically a revolving door. And you'll see a new system that actually makes front desk hiring way easier and boost your retention. And I, like you, in very similar fashion, was wearing every single hat in my practice. This is me graduating PT school. I was super excited, worked somewhere for a couple months, absolutely hated it, so decided I was going to open up my own cash-based physical therapy practice. And I was doing all the marketing, I was doing all my phone calls, I was doing all the in-office sales, all the follow-up, all of those things. But I began drowning in all of the things that were going on. Balls were beginning to be dropped, and I was struggling to follow up with leads. I was, working with some marketing companies at the time to get more leads in the door, and I decided it was time to hire front desk staff. So here's my exact front desk hiring experience for my very first admin, my very first person that I ever hired. I interviewed three people. I asked some of my past patients if they knew anybody. I got a very short list of people. I interviewed somebody. She seemed nice. She seemed bubbly. She seemed fitness forward, which is we treated a lot of fitness athletes at the time. And she seemed like she learned very quickly, had some good experience doing some remote work before. And I thought, hey, this sounds awesome. So I hired her. But 2 weeks later, she quit and said, I just don't think this is going to work out. This isn't what I thought it was. And I was super confused because her significant other was actually a patient of ours, had been really close with us, and this is ultimately kind of where we ended up. And so that turnover led to even more turnover because I lost my very first admin. I lost my first provider because I couldn't get his schedule full simply because my front desk was a revolving door. I burned through three marketing agencies because I thought, man, maybe this is a marketing issue. And then I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to do it myself for a while. And then eventually I hired another admin who actually stuck around for a couple of years. And I want to share with you guys the process that took us from all of this turnover, all of this turmoil, all of this wasted time to ultimately having somebody who stuck around for the greater part of 3.5 years. So I kept asking myself this question, why do I keep having this turnover? Right. And so I began to really narrow this down as I did more and more hiring. We run a virtual admin company at this point where, and a coaching business essentially for cash practices and hybrid practices who need their front desk coached and need to be able to find good quality talent. And ultimately, what I found is that what I was doing and why I had all this turnover is simply because I was guessing, I was having gut feelings of, hey, this person seems nice, they seem bubbly, they got to be great, or we hire out of urgency, which is, shoot, somebody just left and I need somebody in the seat ASAP. Or you guys wait like I did to the very last minute and I was so burnt out and so tired that ultimately I needed to get that somebody in the seat to help me out. And so most of your front desk hires actually fail for these other common reasons. And so outside of feelings, you also have these things, right? Where you're making random job postings, right? And you're finding these people who are really bad fits from day one. And I'll expand on this later, but you've got no real hiring and onboarding process. You bring somebody on, you sit them at the front desk, and you kind of hope for the best. And then owners are really stuck. Like you kind of pick the least bad person. You're like, well, I got five people. I'll pick the least bad one, right? And then ultimately, many of us can't afford to hire somebody full time out of the gate. And so we get a lot of part timers and they're hired to save money. And that's code word for we're going to have a lot of turnover. Now, as it relates to guessing, we hire based on emotion, not evaluation. We don't have a clear grading system. Really, we're just like, hey, can I carry a good conversation with them? They're warm, they're bubbly. This seems great, right? And we don't have a clear grading system at that point. Now, job posts ultimately attract bodies and not A players either. So you throw your Indeed ad up or other job boards locally to you, and you're just attracting warm bodies, not people who can actually close on the phone. And then lastly, you kind of have to quickly fill the position, so you don't have time to fully vet and weed somebody out that isn't a good fit. And this led to many of the myths that are really killing your hiring process. And I know I had many of these same beliefs as well, which is, hey, no one can sell as well as me. And while that's probably true, I've studied this stuff so much, or you would probably say the same thing for you, but if I can get it 90%, that's still better than me trying to do it all myself. And then I thought, I can't really afford real help. I can't afford somebody full time. I can't afford high quality talent. And while that may be true, there are options like virtual admins and other companies that can really help you with this exact thing. Now, we also get this like good people are just hard to find. Like, people just don't want to work anymore. They want too much money. And really, you just have to have a better process because when I interview admins, most of the time it isn't about money, it's about culture fit. Or you start to think, hey, I just need someone who's friendly and somebody who's reliable. And this is the trap that so many of you fall in. And I know I did as well, right? Case in point for my first hire who quit after 2 weeks is you just look for the warm, bubbly personality, but you don't know if the person has the skills that you need. And then you think, well, I'll know the right fit when I meet them. You're relying on gut and emotion. And that's not what's going to get there. But what changed everything for me, what got me out of this state of, hey, my admin quit after 2 weeks, and then I had another admin that I brought on board, and ultimately she didn't pan out after 6 months, and I'll share that story a little more tomorrow. But now the admin that I had recently, she recently left for another opportunity, but she was with us for 3.5 years, right? And the reason that that changed is because I had a system and I didn't, I had a system for hiring, vetting, and finding the right people and actually getting them up to speed, not just me trying to hire a warm body. I trained that admin to actually handle objections and not just be able to read off a piece of paper or just not follow anything at all. But more importantly, we had an accountability and coaching system in place where we came to each other with common problems and common faults that we may have had. And ultimately, we had a collaborative environment to hold each other accountable and for me to hold her accountable. And ultimately, that allowed me to free up 10 to 15 to even 20 hours a week so that I wasn't being stuck on the phones and we could actually get back to growing our practice. And that's ultimately what allowed us to be able to get multiple full-time providers in our practice. We've got 3 full-time providers right now. And that's what allowed us to finally get back to growing rather than having constant turnover at this position and ultimately allowed us to accept our $1 million practice impact award recently, which was really, really cool for us to be able to have happen. And it was a cool milestone that allowed us to get to where I had longed to get for a long time, which was we were struggling to grow. And the only way that I was able to grow is one, I was able to buy back my time. And I was able to actually install a proven hiring and delegation system. And if you don't have a proven system to hire and delegate, you're not going to be able to buy back your time because you're going to have constant turnover and you're going to be constantly having to train and lead new staff members, which is what you don't want to have. Now, the number one skill that separates the top practice owners, those that have actually scaled and got to the next level and actually reached that level of freedom, is they got out of this doing it all myself mentality and hiring random staff and hoping they stick around and or just accepting that, hey, at the end of a year or end of 6 months, the front desk is just going to be a high turnover position. And instead, they learn how to find, train, and lead the right people to get to the next level. And that's what allows you to have retention in your practice. Now, what happens when you actually step into leadership is so many, many things, right? Your phones are answered consistently for the first time ever. Your objections are handled on the phone before they even come into the clinic. And then it leads to predictable revenue. I know we were on the revenue roller coaster, good months, bad months, fast months, slow months, simply because we didn't have somebody who was able to consistently follow up with leads. And then more importantly, get your nights and weekends back. So instead of you treating all day and then calling people the next day, and sometimes you're just too tired to even want to do that at all, ultimately that allows you to get to the next step because now you have freedom. You can relax in the evening and not have to worry about how your phones are being handled. And the only way to grow is to turn your person who is to turn from basically just being stuck in the weeds to somebody who's an actual leader and having the right talent on the bus. And so if you're an operator, right, this is where you're basically answering every call. This is many of you, this was me included early on. We're chasing leads on nights and weekends, or hey, we hire part-time help to help us save money, but ultimately we end up taking most of the calls anyways. We try to manage absolutely everything in our head. We don't have anything documented. It all lives right here. And we have to work very hard to actually grow, as opposed to having a leader, right? This is somebody who, has a trained admin to actually handle calls and take things off your plate. Now, this person also has a system that follows up automatically, right? Where if leads are falling through the cracks, you've got safes and you've got a system and process so your front desk knows that as well. And you invest in trained staff who actually want to stick and produce. Instead of you guys like just hiring somebody, handing them some videos and hoping for the best, you actually invest your own time and your own resources to hire other experts in this field to actually train them to get to where they want to go. And then ultimately, this is the type of business that runs with clear systems and has clear reports. So if your admin is missing a lot of leads due to the insurance objection, you know that at the end of the day, not 6 months from now when your schedule's empty. And ultimately, the leader, instead of trying to work really hard to grow, focuses on buying back their time so that they can predictably scale. And so, who wants to see how to actually make this shift? For those of you catching it live, drop that in the chat. For those of you that are catching this on the replay, do you actually want to see how to make this shift? Do you personally want to get out of this operator role and more into this leader role where you can actually focus on what you do best? And so the way to do that is you actually have to have the A player hiring guide, which is the exact system that I use to hire and vet virtual admins and help our clients find people locally if they prefer local talent. Now, the cycle of frustration that many of you guys are in or that in the hiring process is you hire someone new, you hand them videos and scripts that you've already made and that you maybe have from other mastermind groups, and then they underperform or quit, and now you're back on the phones again. And then now you're scared to hire, or you do hire, and you just deal with turnover every few months. And so my first hiring mistake was we asked three past patients and friends. I interviewed one of these people in person. I told her what we needed. She said, "Yep, that sounds good." And I hired her. And ultimately, that led to us losing a lot of time, effort, energy, and ultimately lost revenue, which is what I want to help you guys avoid today. Now, the problem was I had no process to determine if this person was the right fit for what I was looking for. And there's three simple steps that can help you do the same thing. And it's this funnel where we take potential candidates and ultimately get a hired person who is going to be a rock solid fit on the other side. Now, the way to do that is I have to attract candidates, I have to vet candidates, and then ultimately I'm going to hand select a few to bring in before I make a hire. So, what's the attract phase? This is where you have to cast a massive wide net. So many people don't cast nearly a wide enough net to get to where they want to go. And some of you guys are scared of getting a lot of applications. You put Indeed ads up before. I can put an Indeed ad up for my practice tomorrow, and I probably have 100 people apply in a couple of hours. It's crazy. And so you're scared of that, but it's because you don't have a process to actually get through that. And I'll show you that in the next step. But we have to have a process that actually attracts A players, right? Not these tire kickers. And the best candidates really aren't in on Indeed. Now, I found some good candidates on Indeed, but the issue is we have to make sure that we are finding people that are A players. And some ways to do that is what call like an off-market deal, right? Like, what do you do in real estate? You try to find a house that somebody hasn't put the yard sign up yet, so that you don't have a bunch of people trying to put in offers for a house that you want. The same thing with the front desk. Can you ask your network? Can you interview people that currently have jobs and can you attract them away from their position that they're in? Now, you want to avoid some of these people, and this is where most of you guys hire. You want to hire your friends, your family members, maybe bring your significant other on, and this stuff just never works, right? Because they're part-time, they're just not really sure what the expectations are. They get stuff done sometimes, but you can't actually lead them because they are a family member. Or you hire some college students because they're really cheap and they're only in class a couple hours a day, so it works out well, right? Or you look to find somebody who's burnt out, right? They're like, oh, they're burnt out of their other position. This will be a great. They're like, I just want something. I want to slow down. I want to get out of my rat race, and this is going to be perfect. These people who are burnt out are still going to be burnt out with you as well. They only want part-time hours, or they only want to work a few hours. These are people that ultimately aren't going to pan out because if they only want to work a few hours, that means that they are potentially checked out. And so ultimately, from there, we need to be able to actually vet people and make sure that we're getting the right person. And so if we're going to vet people, we need to weed out tire kickers. So if I get 100 applications, I need to not be talking to the people who have no interest in working with us. And we can do that by reviewing past employment, and just see is there any red flags here. We can test their like multitasking skills before I even interview them. We can take a look at their sales skills, their ability to just kind of figure things out. Like there's so many tests that I bake into our vetting process before I even talk to someone, actually on a Zoom call, right? And the best way to do that is have a process to actually vet these people. And that goes from looking at resumes to being able to maybe even run a personality assessment, which is something we do very often. And I have a baked in test where I make them send us a video to start, and that requires them to figure some things out that are very important for this job. Now, what are some red flags? Ton of recent jobs. They're unclear of what they're looking for. They give you the like cookie cutter interview responses where it's like, oh, I don't have any weaknesses, or my weaknesses is that I'm too organized. It's like, come on, guys, like give me the like let me learn more about you. They're probably hiding something if they're giving you those cookie cutter answers. Maybe they've been a front desk staff member for a while, and over the last couple of years, they've had a couple front desk positions. This is a problem. People perceive that as a strength, but what I don't want is somebody who's been around the front desk for a very long time. And the reason for that is there's a reason they're unemployed, right? Maybe their boss wasn't happy with them. I don't want somebody who's unwilling to take feedback, and I definitely don't want somebody who's not looking for growth. Somebody who's not looking for growth is a B or C player. This is the people who only want to work a few hours because they want to go goof off with their friends or do whatever else that they want to do that's not related to growing the practice. So these are all big red flags that I look for in the vetting process. Now, I want you to not guess, right? Don't just use your emotions. You got to have the same questions, you got to test the same skills, and you actually have to have a rubric that you can refer to. Most of you guys have these like voodoo hiring methods where you just talk to people, you ask them a couple questions and you tell them what it's like to work with you and you offer them a job, right? Which is not a great way to actually hire and vet people. And until you've hired 30 plus people, like you really don't have a gut. Like you're kind of just guessing. And I know early on I made this mistake and I just leaned into my gut feelings, but I didn't have enough. I let emotion rather than logic actually justify my hire. And so the common gut feelings that you might have are, hey, well, they're nice and bubbly. Like I can tell they're going to be great with patients. I did the same thing. Oftentimes I find that nice and bubbly might be the worst people that you could hire because they just don't pan out. Hey, they seem confident. Like that's exactly what we need at the front desk. And maybe they're just confident in an interview, but they're not actually confident in these situations where they're asking about money or talking about being out of network. Hey, they've got experience at another clinic. They'll need less training. And while that may be true, these are probably people who are, there's a reason they're unemployed and looking for a job. Maybe they were underperforming and it might be an opportunity for you to reach out to their previous clinic. Hey, they answered all my questions perfectly. This is actually kind of a red flag for me because now they're probably making answers up on the spot. They're trying to appear like somebody that they're not. And there's a reason why people answer questions perfectly. They seem great in an interview, and then you get them in person, and it's like, who is this person? And what I don't want to have happen is exactly this is where they're answering all your questions, and ultimately they're somebody that they're not. They're pretending to be someone else. So we attract, By casting a wide net, we vet them through some of the things that I just mentioned. And then now we're going to select a small group of people to actually bring in for a one-on-one interview. We're going to select the top 3 to 5 candidates for a final interview. In 1 hour, it simply isn't enough to get to know who somebody is. And that's why I like to have multiple interviews kind of along the way. And if you only have a 1 hour interview with somebody, or maybe you do a quick 15-minute phone interview and then maybe a 30-minute in person, don't really have an indication if somebody has the skills, if they have the personality, and is this actually going to work out? So, a pro tip for you as well, so that you can avoid the urgency. Because what most of you guys do is you skip right to this step, right? Where you'll skip right to the select part. You're like, all right, I got 3 to 5 candidates. I'll bring them in for a 1 hour interview and I'll pick the best one. But a pro tip, so that you don't have to be urgent when you're hiring, is always have an application up so that you can have a list of people to call on in times of urgency. This is something I use a lot for not only hiring clinicians in my practice, but I use this a lot in our virtual admin company as well, where I always have an application open. I always want to be talking to good quality people. And if I have a short list of people that I can call on in a time of crunch, maybe they've got a job somewhere else, but I can actually attract them and lure them away. This is going to be fantastic for you to not have to make a rush decision. And this is actually what happened to us with a PT. We had a PT who left to go be a stay-at-home mom full time, which is great. We were happy for her, but ultimately I needed to get a PT on the bus quickly. Problem is, very hard to find good quality clinicians. But luckily, I'd been keeping applications for the last year and a half after I learned this tip. And I basically called all of those people on that resume. We found a short list and we got that person hired up. And now we have a great clinician leading and working for our team. But I didn't have to panic or make an urgent emergency poor hire because of that. And that's the best thing of all. And so then we bring them in for the final opportunity, the final interview. This is where you got to catch the red flags. Can you work with this person? Do they fit your culture? Are they going to get along with you, the rest of your team? Do they have the skills that they need? All of those things are going to be really important to get where you want to go. And so then you have to actually test these people either in the interview process, or the hiring process as a whole. But ultimately, the thing you need to do is you need to hire for culture and train for skill. What I mean by that is I'll take somebody who's a good culture fit for what it is that we do, but is a little bit green. I would rather take that green person and train them up because they're going to feel like they are growing and they're going to want to stick around longer rather than hiring somebody who's worked for years and years and years in a medical office, but ultimately is a terrible rotten egg for our culture. That's not somebody who I want on the bus. And so here's a look at how I actually hire now. So we run a virtual admin company where we basically have employees that we vet, train, and basically run through this process. And I get them trained up and place them into practices all over the country. Now, with that, I get about 800 people that apply to work with us in a given month. Sometimes more if I'm in a big hiring process, I can ramp this up a little bit, but we get about 800 people. It's a lot, right? So I get 800 people to apply. I have a multi-step skills check that I run all of these people through so that I'm only getting the people who are the warmest and the most excited to actually work with us. From there, I take those people and I move them into a group interview. About 5 to 7 at a time. I usually run 2 a month. So we're getting about 15 of those people in for a group interview. Of these 15, I usually take about 30% of those into a one-on-one interview where I actually sit down, we work through some sales process stuff, and I make sure that they actually work. Then from there, what I do is I run them through our training process where they've got to get fully up to par and up to snuff with all of our sales processes. Only about 20% of that 30% go through. And then of those folks that actually interview with clinics, only about 3 to 5 of those people per month. So 3 to 5 out of the 800, that's 0.6% of people that actually apply to work with us. Yeah, a very low percent even make it into the final one-on-one interview process. And that's because we have a very clear-cut process to weed out people who are not solid fits. And most of you guys aren't hiring at scale, so you just don't get this many applications and you just don't have that many reps at being able to understand what's, a good candidate and what's not. And so the results of this are only the top 0.5% of people actually earn an offer from a clinic. And only the most serious candidates are actually interviewing with me. I don't want to waste my time. Like I got a bunch of things going on. And the result of that is I get a big time drop off in turnover because these are people who've actually put in work to actually work with us. I don't want somebody who just puts an application up and like just shows up. I want somebody who's been invested in the process. And that's going to, somebody who is willing to invest in the process is ultimately not going to leave after 90 days because they have skin in the game. Now, this ultimately allows for the retention of this person to exceed way greater than 1 year. The industry average is like 6.5, 7 months for front desk staff. And ultimately, somebody who is sticking around for a year and a half, 2 years, heck, my admin's sticking around for 3.5 years, this is exceeding ultimately what you're looking for because they have had to jump through a lot of hoops. And what ultimately also happens is new hires are actually up to speed within 30 days, not someday. I talk to so many practice owners that are like, well, they'll get there eventually, they'll figure it out. But we've really got to have somebody who's up to speed within 30 days. And if they're not, then they're probably not cut out for the position. Now, ultimately, you know how to hire and attract the right talent. But great hiring gives you potential, but I've got to take that hiring and I actually have to be able to train that person so that I can actually like make a profit in the business that we're running, right? At the end of the day, you have to make money, otherwise the practice will need to close. And great training does that for you. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about why most training actually fails and the simple shift that helps you create a confident front desk closer, not somebody who's just going to show up and be a warm body. And I want to share with you the exact framework I use to take a bunch of nervous new hires and actually turn them into confident closers. So we'll dive in live tomorrow. See you at 1 p.m. inside the school group. You can click the calendar link as we go live at the top. It'll be flashing red. Join us live, and we will see you guys tomorrow. I'll stick around now for some Q&A if you guys have questions, and we will dive into those.